Good evening. Welcome to the 2019 Distinguished Author Reading. I'm Dean Bacopoulos, co-director of Writers at Grinnell, and I want to welcome you on behalf of the Department of English and the Writers at Grinnell program. Each year in the spring, a distinguished author gives a public reading, conducts a workshop or roundtable, and dines with students and faculty. Among other prestigious honors, the authors who've been distinguished author visitors in the past have won Pulitzer Prizes, including tonight's author, who's won a Pulitzer, the National Book Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the MacArthur Genius Grant. Initiated in 2004, the event usually caps a robust series of readings and workshops on campus. It is made possible by a Grinnell alum who prefers to remain anonymous. But for more than 15 years, he and his wife have supported programming that allows the Grinnell community to hear from and interact with the nation's most prominent writers. Their generosity also gave birth to the popular 6-week short courses taught by faculty from the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, most recently Sam Chang, the director of the workshop. Distinguished authors in recent years have included W.S. Merwin, Marilyn Robinson, John Edgar Wideman, Ana Castillo, Adrienne Rich, Edward P. Jones, Dorothy Allison, Mark Doty, Natasha Trethewey, Tracy K. Smith, Alison Bechdel, Edwige Danticott, James McBride, and Marlon James. And I know that's a lot of names to read, but we're very proud of that list. That's a good list. I would go against any reading series in the country with that list. And I want to thank my colleague Ralph Savarese, who started these distinguished author events in 2004, and also thank Dee Dudley, Writers at Grinnell, technical support specialist, who does all the hard work of getting writers here, because if you left it up to me, we would be pretending that there were authors here. But all those logistics, everything from the cool snacks we've got. And one more thank you before we do our formal introduction. Stephen Duong, our student assistant this year, has been amazing with both flyers, book selling, and everything. There are still 2 more Writers at Grinnell events this semester. Distinguished journalist Will Haygood will be giving the 2019 Mondo Montano Memorial Reading in this room next Thursday night at 8 p.m. And then our last event of the year will be poet Amy Nizuka Matato, who will be reading a special event at the Hotel Grinnell, so it won't be here, it'll be downtown, and it will also be our department annual writing awards on May 2nd. So to stay up to date, you can follow us on Facebook or Twitter or find our webpage. Tonight, it is my honor to introduce renowned poet Tyehimba Jess. I had the pleasure of reading with Mr. Jess several years ago at a literary festival in Dallas, and I remember it made me feel horrible to have to share the stage with him after that performance. I knew then, right after hearing him read, that I wanted to bring him to Grinnell College eventually, and that my students and colleagues and neighbors would have the chance to experience what I experienced at that reading. Sort of wish I'd done it before the Pulitzer. It'd be a little cheaper, but hey. I was happy for him. I kid. Equally at home in the world of slam poetry or the world of formal poetics, Tyehimba Jess is a poet unafraid to explore the unexplored narratives of history, dig under the surface of the names on the gravestones, and reanimate in his own inimitable way the voices buried there. Reading Jess's work, one believes that the poet's most powerful magic is this kind of conjuring up of long silent ghosts, telling their stories again, but this time with meanings denied to those stories originally by racism, historical ignorance, and marginalization. Jess's most recent collection, Olio, won the 2017 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. It also received the Ansfield Wolf Book Award and the Midland Society's Author Award in Poetry, as well as an outstanding contribution to publishing citation from the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Poet and essayist Hanif Abdurraqib, who will be next year's Mondo Memorial Lecturer in spring of 2020, we just confirmed, wrote this of Olio back in 2016. If we are to have Black history that lives outside of our bodies and resonates in the world, we are going to have to do it ourselves. I have long known this, being presented a mainstream history where our stories were drowning only in pain or grief. Tyehimba Jess has always been vital to the archiving of Black performance and Black performers. In his new collection, Olio, he continues this tradition. In the poem Minnehaha, written in the voice of sculptor Edmonia Lewis, Jess writes, "What part of me is mine? That was not mined from the mind of poets." And now back to Abdur-Rakib's words. "And I return again to the idea of history. What is it to speak for the dead, or to speak for someone who no one has an interest in hearing until they are on a stage?" Jess's first poetry collection, Leadbelly, and both books are available tonight, and there'll be a signing after the reading, is an exploration of the life of blues musician Huddie Leadbelly Ledbetter, and was chosen for the National Poetry Series, and was named the Best Poetry Book of the Year by many trade publications. Jess is also a two-time member of the Chicago Green Mill Slam team, and was Chicago's poetry ambassador to Accra, Ghana. In addition to winning that Pulitzer Prize, Jess has garnered many other awards, including a Whiting Writers Award, a Chicago Sun-Times Poetry Award, and a Gwendolyn Brooks Open Mic Poetry Award. A former artist in residence with Cave Canem, Jess has been awarded fellowships from the NEA, the Illinois Arts Council, and the Fine Arts Work Center at Provincetown, as well as a land and writing residency. He's a graduate of NYU, a native of Detroit, and he has taught at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign and in New York City at the Juilliard School, and currently at the College of Staten Island, where he is professor of English. But tonight, we're pleased to have him at our institution, at Grinnell College. Please join me in welcoming him.
Well, we're just my laptop went to sleep, and now I gotta wake it up again. Wait, put my long password in here, and boom. Okay, all right, here we go. Well, yes, please. Okay, great. Well, it's good to be here, Grinnell. I'm honored to be here in front of you here in Iowa, in the prairie. I'm from the Midwest myself. I'm from up the street and around the way in Detroit, and I spent a long time in Chicago. So it's good to be back in the Midwest for a hot second. And I'm here to read some poems, and from this book here, Olio. I think I want to thank Dean and the Grinnell team for bringing me here, and making it had a great dinner. We talked a whole lot of politics and a little bit of art, and for meeting with your students who had really interesting things to say and interesting questions. And you have a beautiful campus. So really, thanks for bringing me here. And thank you for coming out for poetry when you could be right up in front of Netflix. I know how it is. I know how it be. So I hear you. Much respect. So I'm going to read, I think I'm going to preface from a little excerpt from this book, because it's a little bit about what I'm here about. Now, this is an excerpt from an interview. There's a series of interviews with a gentleman who is seeking the history of Scott Joplin, and he runs across a guy that we'll come across later. His name's Blind Boone. And he says, and Blind Boone says to him, "Well now, looks like Scott got himself a straight man." "Excuse me?" "An interpreter, son. An interlocutor. A straight man. Someone to guide us through the forest of tall tale and superstition. Sort out the foolish from the fact. That's what I smelled on you when you walked through that door. The scent of someone in search of a story. Mr. Boone, I rather don't think of myself as a performer in a minstrel show. Ha! Most don't. But fact is that the minstrel show is only a grin or a shuffle away from any living Negro trying to tell his own true, full story and survive in the world. the true story now. There's a way to tell it straight and true so that the joke's not on you, but all around you. The whole round riddle of it. How you came to be where you at and what folks told you along the way. They got you there. So I guess I'm your interlocutor to some degree for this olio this evening. An olio is a mix of ingredients that come together to form a meal. In the context of literature, it's a mix of forms in a body, in a book that come together to form that book. In the context of American theater, the olio is the middle part of the minstrel show. The minstrel show was started in the early part of the 19th century by white performers putting on blackface and tattered clothes in order to make caricatures of black folks. It is a vehicle of psychological warfare on behalf of white supremacy. A minstrel show thrived throughout the 19th century into the early 20th, the olio alongside with it. In the early 20th century, when the minstrel show kind of died off, the olio evolved into what we know as vaudeville. And so there you have the makings of the Great White Way, which was Broadway. So the minstrel show is at the very root of American theater. And in this book, what you have are stories from the lives of African-American creatives who were born just before the Civil War or lived right after the Civil War up until World War I, and were endeavoring to make of their lives creative ventures, creative careers, singers, piano players, sculptor, people who were into performance in the years just when black folks were beginning to be able to choose what we were going to play, when we were going to play it, what instrument we were going to play, and creating a career around that idea of performance. So there's people in this book like Cissy Retta Jones, first person to sing in Carnegie Hall before it was Carnegie Hall. Scott Joplin, who you were just listening to, right? Father of ragtime. There's also Burt Williams, who's a famous minstrel performer, whose song you were listening to which became a jazz standard up until this day. The name of the song was Nobody. I'm going to introduce you to some of these folks, and ready to strap in and see some of them with me? Okay, fantastic. So, first folks I'd like to introduce you to are the McCoy twins, Christine and Millie McCoy. They are indeed twins. They were born in North Carolina in the year 1849. They are not just standing back to back in this picture. They are what you would call pygopagous twins. They are joined essentially from the bottom of the rib cage all the way through the pelvis. Very rare condition to be born as surviving pygopagous twins. And these ladies survived into their 60s. They had a fascinating tale, born into slavery, and after the years of slavery, choosing a career that had many twists and turns. So I'd like to introduce to you some poems that would introduce them. Sounds good? Okay. So, okay, that's not the first one. Here we go. This is the first poem that I'd like to introduce. This is what I call a syncopated sonnet. And it contains two voices in one sonnet. Now, how many sonneteers we got in the house? That many, huh? Okay. All right, that's cool. Because we're going to do a little bit of poetry lesson. A sonnet is just a poem that has 14 lines. There's a certain rhyme scheme that goes through a sonnet. It's A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G, like you're stuttering through the alphabet. These are Shakespearean sonnets. okay? Named for the guy, of course, Shakespeare, who made Shakespearean sonnets a lot. And Shakespearean sonnets Shakespeare was actually very, very popular in the 19th century throughout the United States. And I wanted to create some poems that would speak to these ladies. And if you read down the middle of this poem, you find their conjoined voices coming together to tell their story. If you read on one side, you hear Millie's solo voice, and if you read on the other side, you hear Christine's solo voice. So, reading down the middle, we're fused in blood and body from one thrum stem, budding twin blooms of song. We're a double rose, grown from hard labor that made our mother shout, spent with awe. We hymn to pay soft homage, born of and beyond the flesh. We are just two women singing truths we can't forget. If we read down Millie's side of this poem, we've mended two songs, the one dark skin, bleeding soprano into contralto, descended from raw carnage of the South, burst and open our freedom. We sing past rage to the work song's aria. It leaves us soaked in history like our father's sweat from plantation to grave. Lord, here we are, free twin sisters who've hauled our voices far. We read Christine's side. We ride the wake of each other's rhythm, beating our heart's syncopated tempo with a music all our own. With our mouths seeped in the glow of hand-me-down courage, drenched in spiritual acapellas, flowing soul from bone through skin. We pay debts from broken chattel to circus stars. We sing straight from this nation's barbed-wired heart. However, if we combine their voices and read all the way across, we find them reading in a syncopated way. So, we've mended two songs, the one dark skin. We ride the wake of each other's rhythm, bleeding soprano into contralto, beating our heart's syncopated tempo. We're fused in blood and body from one thrum stem, budding twin blooms of song. We're a double rose, descended from raw carnage of the South, with a music all our own. With our mouths burst and open our freedom, we sing past rage, steeped in the glow of hand-me-down courage, grown from hard labor that made our mother shout, spent with awe. We hymn to pay soft homage to the work song's aria. It leaves us drenched in spiritual acapellas, soaked in history like our father's sweat, flowing soul from bone through skin. We pay debts born of and beyond the flesh. We are just two women singing truths we can't forget from plantation to grave. Lord, here we are, from broken chattel to circus stars, free twin sisters who've hauled our voices far. We sing straight from this nation's barbed-wired heart. So, following the strictures of a ABABCDCDEFGG rhyme scheme, we have skin, contralto, stem, rose, right? South, rage, shout, homage, sweat, just forget, and R, far. Get that? And rhythm, tempo, stem, rose, mouths, courage, shout, homage, acapellas, that's a soft rhyme there. Forget, and then stars and heart. So they are true sonnets. So, after surviving birth, after surviving their slave owner's decision not to dispose of them, right? After surviving his decision about whether or not what he would do with them, because there's a bevy of questions that accompanied their birth. One was, what was their owner going to do with them? Was he going to put them in the field to gather crops? Was he going to put them in the house to tend to the kitchen or to the caretaking of the furniture, et cetera, et cetera? Well, what he decided to do was, instead of doing either one of those things, he decided he would make more money off of them, off of this product born onto his plantation, if he didn't have them on the plantation at all. But if he loaned them out, rented them out to a traveling freak show that went around the state from county to county, town to town, village to village, showing them off as part of a freak show. So that's what he did. when they were about at the age of about 14 months. Took them from their mother and have them travel all around, village to village, here and there, everywhere, in the caretaking of a freak show owner. One thing that also accompanied them on their travels from place to place was the fact that there were people that were curious, not just for the purpose of gazing upon them, but there were medical men that were interested in verifying whether they were indeed Pygopicus twins. So, every time they went to a new place, to a new village, they were subjected to the most indiscreet of examinations, over and over and over and over again, when they were toddlers. This persisted throughout their youth, up until the time that they achieved emancipation at the end of the Civil War, 1865, whereupon they got affidavits that swore to the fact that they were indeed Pygopicus twins. And after that point, they no longer had to be subjected to such rigorous examination. This next poem is about that. McCoy sisters on display. If we read down the middle, we find their conjoined voices. We count the blessings of our doubled shell as we pay our dues. We've proven ourselves for science. We've been taken town to town like prize bovine. We've been pawed up and down. Each sawbone has searched us from spine to loin. Our wondrous oneness exists. We're conjoined. We're not frauds, but born of providence. God mended two souls into one dark skin. And at this point, I'd like to introduce one facility that these syncopated sonnets have, these contrapuntal poems have, and that is the ability to enter the poem as a reader from multiple directions. So, one might just as well start from God mended two souls into one dark skin. We're not frauds, but born of providence. And we've listened to doctors who understand. We've been probed, prodded, and roughly examined from my twin's navel to between her thighs. Been photographed, half nude, verified to those who doubt our form. We have performed with each breath. We prove we've endured faith's storm. We count the blessings of our double shell every time we rise to face the crowd's face on display. We've been richly, rudely paid to prove veracity. They've scanned each side and then back up, staring into my eyes from backbone to backbone, from hip to hip. Our miracle is real. Hear and see this. We're not frauds, but born of providence. God mended two souls into one dark skin. We're not frauds, but born of providence. Our wondrous oneness exists. We're conjoined. Each sawbone has searched us from spine to loin like prize bovine. We've been pawed up and down for science. We've been taken town to town as we pay our dues. We've proven ourselves. We count the blessings of our double shell. So, thank you. So one can approach these poems from multiple directions. They go read down. They also read up, but they read diagonally and in multiple directions. Essentially, every line reads to every adjoining line. So, on with their story. Seems that if you're the kind of guy who's going to take a couple of toddlers and subject them to constant inspection, bodily inspection over and over again, and put them on display and gain wages from that, you might not have the highest moral character. And that was true with this gentleman that took them around the state. So what he decided to do was to not share the monies that he gained from their showing with the slave owner. What he decided to do was to take that money for himself. He decided to take them to Britain and put them on display all over again and just take all the money and put it in his own pocket. So the question for their owner was once again, well, how do I get profit? How do I regain the profit stolen from me, from my plantation? What he decided to do was to take their mother, put her on a boat, take her with him over to England, and track these little girls down. He searched all over London, found where they were performing, where they were going to be displayed, walked in with their mother, and the first thing that they said upon seeing their mother for the first time after months was, of course, what all of us would say if we hadn't seen our mother for months at 2 and 3 years old. Mommy. And that was proof of ownership. Because if you own the mother under the peculiar institution, you own all the offspring of the mother. So that was his claim to ownership over the McCoy twins. However, there was one twist, one possible twist to this story. And that was, it was in England in the year 1851. And at that time, slavery in Great Britain had been abolished. So the question for their mother was, would she sue to stay in the UK with her babies, with her 2 little girls, and enjoy the freedoms of Great Britain? Or would she take her little girls with her and go back to the United States where she had a husband and 5 other kids? And that was a difficult decision she had to make. And it is portrayed in this next poem. Millie Christine are kidnapped. Straight into Dixie's rebellious mouth, our mother left England and went back south. Choosing between homeland and untold harms, torn between family or freedom's unknowns, we returned to a master we could trust. We went back to bondage in mother's arms. We sailed back to our Carolina home. We'd earned a London court sympathy, and thus, though we'd missed family, were we not blessed? Because of our great popularity, the thief's greed had set us free. Although bonded, we'd been smuggled to freedom's soil, and yes, from slavery, we'd slipped into liberty. We'd been stolen from mother and master, absconded like contraband. We'd been shipped to Britain, imported by a scallywag agent at the age of 3. We'd been kidnapped afar. We'd been written and sold, then snatched. Taken like double dark treasures, entertainment straight from America's barbed wire heart at the age of 3. We've been kidnapped afar. We've been stolen from mother and master. Absconded, the thief's greed had set us free. Although bonded, we'd earned a London court sympathy, and thus we returned to a master we could trust. Our mother left England and went back south, straight into Dixie's rebellious mouth. So, curious about their story, I researched more. Turned out that when they got back to the United States, and this is actually one of 3 kidnappings in the book, 2 physical, 1 virtual. Okay, but after they got back to the United States, they continued to perform at the master's behest, and they continued to perform until the end of the Civil War. At which point, they had to make the decision that Black folks all across the country had to make, which was, what am I going to do with my freedom? How am I going to put food on my plate and shelter over my head? And what they decided to do was to continue in the freak show business, however, of their own volition, and with affidavits that swore to the fact that they were Pygopicus twins, so they no longer had to endure inspections. And that they did. They traveled first around the United States, then they traveled to Europe, and then they eventually traveled all around the world on display. However, they did not just stand in front of audiences and get gawked at. They were actually very talented. Spoke more languages than I speak. They spoke French, German, and English. Played multiple instruments. So they had a little band together. They sang duets, of course. They danced together. They put on quite a show. And they became very, very popular. performed in front of kings and queens, dukes and earls. And along with that popularity came a little bit of financial gain, of course. Not just a little, but a substantial amount. So they got some ducats here, some francs there, et cetera, dollars here and everywhere. And what they did with that money was that they saved some for themselves, of course, but like dutiful daughters, they sent a sizable portion of that money back home to mom and dad and their brothers and sisters. And what did their folks do with that money? Well, they saved it, and inch by inch, foot by foot, yard by yard, acre by acre, they bought the plantation upon which they had once been slaves. And that land is still in the McCoy family's name to this day. So, that's inspiration for anybody looking to buy some land, I would think. Millie Christine, buy land. We're free twin sisters who've heard our voices far. We're singing in drei Sprach und machen es schwarz. That means roughly in German, we sing in 3 languages and make them black. We speak more than one tongue. Wherever we roam, this gift's pure gold. Or we travel the road with dimes ordered by pinching francs and pounds against servitude. We sing freedom bound with duets all mingled up to heaven. We bought land that once enslaved our parents with duets all mingled up to heaven, and we know the cost. We've overcome against servitude. We sing freedom bound from each gawking crowd. Meanwhile, dollars stack. The Lord provides for us. We make greenbacks. This gift's pure gold. Or we travel the road, we've made our wealth. For gratification, we speak more than one tongue. Wherever we roam, nous avons chanté le français à Paris. We've sung hymns before Queen Victoria. We're singing in drei Sprach und machen es schwarz. We melodize worldwide. More than just freaks, we're certified global phenomena. We're free twin sisters who've hauled our voices far. So, this penultimate poem I'm going to read for you is just an expression of the gratitude they had towards each other. They did not feel like that they were taking up unnecessary space on the planet. They were very proud of themselves and their accomplishments. And this is Millie Christine's love story. So, here. This is our story I want you to hear. One body crooning 2 notes. By God, we're our own duet. Listen to how we're bound in unison. Listen to the grace we have ringing within me and my other half, airborne, shook and shimmering through my head like sympathetic strings. Each sung sound with Christine's voice at my side. I have sung with Millie's embracing contrapuntal, so you can see my life is brimmed. It's full in a way very few could comprehend, with souls ablaze. This is how I know love, the way any other human would love. I love my song and dance and family. I love this burden that we've been given to ride the shared wake of one blood's rhythm. I love this burden that we've been given, the way you love your own blood, twice as much. I've doubled the cause to celebrate life. I love my song and dance and family with every breath we've got. I'm filled completely the way any other human would love, with souls ablaze. This is how I know love in the way very few could comprehend. With Millie's embracing contrapuntal, airborne, shook and shimmering through my head like sympathetic strings. Each sung sound, one body, crooning 2 notes. By God, we're ringing within me and my other half in unison. Listen to the grace we have here. This is our story I want you to hear. Thank you. So now there's this concept in sonnet land, which I'm introducing you to, called a crown of sonnets. The crown of sonnets is when you have one sonnet and the last line of that sonnet becomes the first line of the next sonnet. The last line of that sonnet becomes the first line of the next sonnet, and so on and so forth, until the last line of the last sonnet becomes the first line of the first sonnet. So that makes like a circle, get it? Like a crown, right? There's a few crowns of sonnets in this book, but this is not one of them. However, I wanted to capture the concept of a crown of sonnets. So, what I was able to do was to take some of the lines from this very first poem. We've made it 2 songs to One Dark Skin. We ride the wake of each other's rhythm. We sing straight from the nation's barbed wire heart and free twin sisters who've hauled our voices far, and add them into the beginning lines or ending lines of the other poems, such as in this case, it's God mended 2 souls into one dark skin. And in the next poem, it is straight from America's barbed wired heart. And in the next poem, it is we're free twin sisters who've hauled our voices far. And in the final one, it is to ride the shared wake of one blood's rhythm. So, when you conjoin those lines next to the lines from the original poem, what you end up with is something that looks like this, which is a star of syncopated sonnets, which one might read, say, starting from the top and then going all the way down through the middle, the conjoined middle, and all the way down to the other side, to the bottom. And then perhaps you want to come all the way back up again, and then go through the middle, and then go all the way down again, and then come all the way back up to the top and go whichever direction one might want to go. This is what you call, a little tiny poetry lesson once again, this is called a concrete poem. A concrete poem is a poem that takes on the shape of the subject of the poem. So in this case, we have 2 separate heads, a conjoined middle, and 2 separate bases. So that's the star of syncopated sonnets. And can I borrow somebody's? Do you have a copy of the book over there? Who has it? Can I borrow yours? Thank you so much. Now, hope you don't mind me doing this, but I just need to show for the audience's edification that it does indeed, the star folds out of the book, right? There are 4 poems in the book that fold out, and because this is a lesson in deconstructing history and re-understanding history, you can deconstruct by tearing that very poem out of the book and having it on display wherever you may desire. Okay? So that is the star of syncopated sonnets. For the stars, the McCoy twins. Thank you. Can I hold on to this for a second? Thank you. So I want to meet some more folks from the Olio. Yes? Okay, fantastic. So the next people I'm going to introduce you to are these gentlemen right here. These folks, these 2 guys, are Burt Williams and George Walker. And you might think of them as the Key and Peele, really, seriously, of about 100 years ago. Because that's the kind of space that they occupied, right? They were a very successful comedic duo, okay? They were born in the mid-1870s, which meant because they felt funny bones inside themselves and they wanted to express that humor to other people, what that meant was that the only way that they were going to be successful at doing so was going to be through the minstrel show. So that's what they did. They were minstrels. They were in the minstrel show. They wore blackface. They wore the tattered clothes. Now, of course, that's not what they're wearing here. That's how they dressed off stage, right? Because they were they became very, very successful in their minstrel occupation. My man George over there was rumored to have a cane with thousands of dollars of diamonds on it. They would walk around with. Not something I would do, but that's what he did, right? They were fast friends and great comedy duo because they were not just invested in the caricature of the minstrel show. They were invested in finding a way to make the audience not just laugh, but to cry. W.C. Fields said that they were the only comedy act that could make him do both in the same show, right? So they were not just about a flatness of character. They were about creating characters with depth. And as a result, they were very successful at their craft, and they were also responsible for some of the very first independent African-American theatrical productions put on in this country, right? So I wanted to write a poem that would kind of express where they were coming from. But before I get to that poem, I do need to show you another part of the minstrel legacy. And this is a piece of found text that I found it necessary to put in the book. And it is the Whitmark Amateur Minstrel Guide and Burnt Cork Encyclopedia, which is a title I am not imaginative enough to come up with by myself. I found this book in the Brooklyn Public Library, right? And this is a handy-dandy guide to those who might want to put on a minstrel show, say, in their college, or in their fraternity, or in their sorority, or in their church, or in their high school, or in their elementary school, or at the office, or at the Lions Club, or wherever. You might want to put on a minstrel show to entertain yourselves. It's part of this great American tradition. And these gentlemen put together this Amateur Minstrel Guide and Burnt Cork Encyclopedia, which declares that minstrelsy is the one American form of amusement purely our own, right? And of course, there are instructions for the middleman and the stage manager. No minstrel guide would be complete without a guide on how to black up. Now, we've seen, I just did this presentation a few months ago in the state of Florida on the very day that I think it was the attorney general for that state resigned because he put on blackface and made a mockery of the citizens of the city of New Orleans. And he did that within 2 months after the great hurricane that devastated that city, right? So we see the tradition of blacking up. We see the tradition of a kind of advertising agency for white supremacy that minstrelsy was, right? Blacking up by putting charcoal on your face and smearing it with oil, right? And of course, it has been the aim of the writer to provide for the young amateur a gold mine in which to delve and draw forth chunks of fun to spring upon his audience. He has also endeavored to make this book a veritable encyclopedia of everything pertaining to minstrels. At the same time, he has not forgotten to build a work to which the reader can turn and peruse when seeking funny literature or a remedy for that tired feeling called ennui or the blues. Because we know that on one side of this equation was a kind of amusement. On the other side was the very definition of the blues, yes? Now, to our friends, Burt Williams and George Walker, this is their stand-up act, their little double talk performance. This is the Burt Williams-George Walker paradox. Here we have two Huzzles. Huzzle, spelled G-H-A-Z-A-L. Any Huzzle fans in the house? Oh, there you go. I see you. Yeah, right. These are two Huzzles, Indo-Arabic form, roughly 1,000 years old. Started in song, kind of like the blues. Drifted over into American literature. There's a couple rules about a Huzzle. One is that every other line has to repeat the same word or phrase. So, on Burt Williams' side of the equation, we have nobody, 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 right? And we know that's the name of what? The song that you were listening to earlier that became a jazz standard. On the other side, we have George Walker, face, 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 because this is about face. It's about face and masking the face, yes? Also, no, there's a rule in Huzzle making that says every line has to have the same kind of rhythm, so to speak. However, in this case, I was just able to make it every line 13 syllables. So, what I'd like to do with you is to examine this interchange between our friends Bert Williams and George Walker. Are you ready? Are you sure? All right. Just want to make sure. Let's follow what these double-talking gentlemen have to say. So, Bert Williams starts. Sing like me, Jonah in the charcoal hold of the whale, doing justice to my juba jig. See how I dance? Just might be playing you for a fool. You see this face? Be smiling till the crowd starts to cry. This nobody, born to riddle all about race, a sure bet nobody got them laughing loud like me. You think they mock my face? Can't help but see themselves just beneath my blacked up face. Might be saying, look at that handsome man. Nobody might be saying, look at that handsome man. Nobody being swept up in my diamond stud strut. Bless those that being buried neath my ash. Don't claim that nobody being buried neath my ash. Don't claim that nobody getting touched from inside out. Every wide-eyed face getting touched from inside out. Every wide-eyed face in the crowd all gupping with laughter. They know that they knuckled under humor. Who escapes it? Nobody knuckled under humor. Who escapes it? Nobody teared up in titters, then torn down sad. A soiled soul full of fret about humanity. It's masked on my face, bird to sing fresh out of pain. I sing like nobody, full of bulging eyes, cakewalking along to ragtime, atop a dancing darkness, shining hard. No, I'm not speaking low of my woe. Little fame don't hurt nobody struggling not to fade away. That's the role that I play, struggling not to fade away. That's the role that I play, bit enough to snicker itself, or in white folks' faces, gone corrupt with comedy. That's the ticket I sell, gone corrupt with comedy. That's the ticket I sell, tickled with slapstick blackness. I'll color each white face filled with black magic. Don't tell me that ain't nobody teary when I mime a losing card game. I want them rolling in aisles each time. Have you seen their faces? Beyond the skin. Here in my show, they are me. They'll be clowning with minds freed up. They see me and soon they get themselves. See, most crowds know nothing about nobody living neath course costume. My crowds got to face this face, trying to rise up the race. We're two real coons, proud of rising through blackface. Some claim how we ain't nobody, changing the game a bit. We've made ourselves somebody's pushing passive coon. We'll make theater about face, mind and joy out of hurt. But that's better than nobody closing the curtain on coon shows. That is our mission, closing the curtain on coon shows. That is our mission. So slowly erasing darky to dawn a human face, doing the work we're born to do. See, we want to be working with a truth that smothers Jim Crow's stench. We are working with a truth that smothers Jim Crow's stench. We are beholden only to the self. Can't stop nobody reflecting how every live soul holds a dream. We're wise to the dark's risks. I'll shine the crowd. I'll have each face sure of the price. What our act's worth. Bet you nobody wise to the dark's risk. I'll shine the crowd. I have each face reflecting how every live soul holds a dream. We're dead set to swagger into undeferred dream. Look, we're beholden only to the self. Can't stop nobody doing the work we're born to do. See, we want to be telling real human comedies. That's us. Nobody telling real human comedies. That's us. Nobody closing the curtain on cool shows. That is our mission. Slowly erasing darky to dawn a human face, making theater about us. Plays a paradox, pushing passive coon. We'll make theater about face, mind and joy out of hurt. That's better than nobody changing the game a bit. We've made ourselves somebody's being sent here to ponder our pride. But we sweat cold rising through blackface. Some claim how we ain't nobody rising through blackface. Some claim how we ain't nobody spitting back high-class grace from all the bile been swallowed trying to rise up the race. Two real coons, proud of themselves. See, most crowds know nothing about nobody themselves. See, most crowds know nothing about nobody living neath course costume. My crowd's got to face this face beyond the skin. Here in my show, they are me. They'll be clowning with minds freed up. They see me and soon they get all grinned up. I stay sharp or I can't get nobody red with laughter when I crack wise. That's how I get them rolling in aisles each time. Have you seen their faces? Teary when I mime a losing card game. I want them filled with black magic. Don't tell me that ain't nobody gone corrupt with comedy. That's the ticket I sell, yearning for tragic Negro to uplift them, to buck, crooning while coon songs paint my strife. They claim nobody crooning while coon songs paint my strife. They claim nobody making folk double take what they see. I'm the straight man, making folk double take what they see. I'm the straight man, speaking low of my woe. No fame don't hurt nobody atop of dancing darkness, shining hard. No, I'm not full of bulging eyes, cakewalking along to ragtime, bird to sing fresh out of pain. I sang like nobody, bird to sing fresh out of pain. I sang like nobody, teared up in titters, then torn down sad. A soiled soul, remembering my tale, not hopeless but lonely. One knuckled under humor, who escapes it? Nobody knuckled under humor, who escapes it? Nobody in the crowd all gulping with laughter. They know that they will be baptized clean. I want to make it so. Each face holding secret smiles for another man's plight. A shame getting touched from inside out. Every wide-eyed face being buried beneath my ash. Don't claim that nobody wondering about Dark's pathos. Believe the human wondering about Dark's pathos. Believe the human can't help but see themselves just beneath my blacked up face. Got them laughing loud like me. You think they mock my face? Wondering all about race. A sure bet nobody be smiling till the crowd starts to cry. This nobody just might be playing you for a fool. You see, this face just might be playing you for a fool. You see, this face sing like me, Jonah in the charcoal hold of the whale, doing justice to my juba jig. See how I dance? Doing justice to my juba jig. See how I dance? Doing justice to my juba jig. See how I dance? Doing justice to my juba jig. See how I dance? Thank you. Now, when you buy the book, you will notice that that poem also. Let me see. Where is this? Where is this poem right here? That poem has two sides to it, and when you get to it, oh, I know. Here it is. When you get to it, you will see that it also folds out of the book as such. And on one side, you will see the instructions for the minstrel show. On the other side, of course, you'll see our two friends, Burt Williams and George Walker, standing up, trading lines back and forth. Now, once again, what's your name, my friend? What's your name? Fada? Thank you, Fada. We've never met before, have we? You haven't jury-rigged this book for me, have you? Once again, this is a book, this is a poem that tears directly out of the book, right? You can see that. Any tears there? Whoops. Any tears here? No? No? Very smooth, right? Okay. So, once again, we have, on one side, we have our friends, Burt Williams and George Walker. On the other side, we have the instructions to the minstrel show, right? Also, what we have here is a poem with a different kind of construction that you may have noticed. One is that the left side of the page has a coherent relationship with the right side of the page, and vice versa, right? Two is that whenever you hit a period or a colon here, the line becomes recursive. So, at the bottom, who escapes it? Nobody knuckled under humor. Or above it, a shame holding secret smiles for another man's plight. Or they know that they, in the crowd, all gulping with laughter. Or they know that, or above it, every wide-eyed face getting touched from inside out. Right? So, what that means is that what you have here, any math people in the house? No math majors? Poetry, reading, there you go. All right? Geometry. We have an XY axis, which means a plane. Yes? Plane is a not have depth, right? However, when you bring these two sides together so that you can read them going around and around, now you have a cylinder, right? That reads all the way around, up and down, backwards and forwards, right? Okay. That also happens when you bring the top and the bottom together, because the top reads in the bottom, and the bottom reads all up into the top. So now you have two cylinder structures, which we've transformed from the two-dimensional captivity of the plane, and we've gone into a three-dimensional structure. This is, for you, those who want to look it up, this is a concept called a flat torus, T-O-R-U-S. Now, because you can get the sides together and the top and the bottom together, that also means you can do both of these things at the same time. So, if you fold down the caesura, the separation between our two friends, right, and bring the top and the bottom together, now you have the shape of what some of y'all had for breakfast this morning, a donut. Right? Which can be read around and around, backwards and forwards on the inside, around and around, backwards and forwards on the outside, and from the inside to the outside ad infinitum, around and around and around with no stop. So, we've gone completely from a two-dimensional construction to a three-dimensional construction, just like our friends were trying to do. They were trying to go from the minstrel stage with a two-dimensional depiction of a caricature and develop three-dimensional characters from that format, right? And they were able to do that by making the audience laugh and cry and developing their own independent theater productions. There's one final twist, however, which is if you take one side and give it one final twist, now you have what is known as a Mobius strip, which is indeed a three-dimensional paradox, right? That can be read from side to side, in and out, from one voice channeling to the other voice, backwards and forwards, ad infinitum. So that is the Burt Williams, George Walker paradox, no more complicated than what these gentlemen were trying to do in the early part of the 19th century. Thank you. Thank you. So, I think now is a good time to, how are we doing on time? Are we out of time? Why don't we do some Q&A? Yeah.
All right, let's get into it. Raise your hand, I'll bring you the mic so all can hear.
Hello. I'm a math person, so I loved that poem a lot. But my question is about your sonnets. I'm curious, when you create a sonnet that has that multi-directional structure, do you write it in a particular direction?
From the top to the bottom. Some of them are written in reverse. So the ones at the top, these two were written in reverse. So they were started right here and ended right there. But I just flipped them around in the end. Yeah.
And if you are able to stand, please do when they bring you the mic, because we are recording this. So any other questions? Here we go. Some in the back here.
Thank you so much for coming. This has been incredible.
Glad to be here.
My question is, a lot of the poetry, and I'm just becoming familiar with your poetry, but a lot of your poetry seems to be centered around entertainers. And I'm just kind of wondering what your background is and why that particular vehicle for your poetry.
Well, I'm involved in the arts. and I write, and I've performed poetry competitively. So I think that for any black artist, and really for any black person today, in America, what you're talking about is, to a certain degree, when Du Bois, another concept that's lying behind some of this work is the idea of W.B. Du Bois' double consciousness. And W.B. Du Bois does kind of make a kind of quasi appearance in the book. But it's the idea of having to perform or having to maintain two different consciousness in at work versus when one's in one's community, being cognizant of the different set of rules that apply towards white and black, right? So I think that it is about being an entertainer, but it's also about handling oneself and maintaining one's sanity and integrity, being black and in the United States. So it's about all of those things at the same time.
Good question.
Hi, thank you for coming to this and also the roundtable earlier. I have a question about ancestors. I've been thinking a lot. This is gonna be a bad paraphrase, but I think Maxine Hong Kingston said that writing a story or telling the story of someone who came before you is a kind of ancestor worship, and that you're sort of invoking these people from the past to help you make sense of maybe something in your life or something in the present.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering what you think of the word ancestor and what that means to your writing, whether that's your ancestors or your literary ancestors.
That's a good question. I think that they are ancestral spirits for me. I think that they are. I'll just say that writing this book took about 7.5 years or so, and during that time, in Leadbelly, the book before, it took 5 years. So during that time, I'm doing a lot of research on all of these people's lives, etc. And it does become a little and then you're going through poems and drafts 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 of poems. So it is a little like you're walking with them for a long time, and they're whispering in your ear and they're saying, do you really think I would say that? Or don't you think I could say this a little better? Or, oh, okay, I think maybe I do. I actually might say that type of thing. And they're also saying, something akin to treat my story with respect, because my story really is your story. You don't have a story without me having a story, right? So treat my story with respect, and try to carry it the best way that you can. And so in constructing these poems, that's my aim. And sometimes it means saying sometimes unpleasant things about people. Like in the book Leadbelly was not always a nice person. He killed one man and stabbed one guy half to death, and he was violent with women. That's real, okay? But to avoid that reality would be to be dishonest about who he was, right? So it's about trying to research. That's why I spend a lot of time trying to research as much as I can about what actually happened in these people's lives. So the poems are constructed around actual events that happened. There's a timeline in the back of the book that gives a comparative timeline between the lives of the people in the book and the events that were happening around them in United States history. There's also a bibliography in the back of the book. So you can go and look up these sources for yourself, and have the same level of fascination with these very interesting stories that I had, right? And I guess I consider that part of my work towards lengthening and reconsidering their legacies. Because I felt these people lived fascinating lives. But one thing that angered me was that, I had no real idea who Edmonia Lewis was. And I felt bad about that. Edmonia Lewis was, I think I said before, I think she's a sculptor who made $50,000 sculptures in the 1870s and 1880s. Fish Jubilee singers who have a crown of sonnets going through this book that goes from the beginning to the end. If you've ever heard a spiritual ever in your life, that spiritual owes a debt to the Fisk Jubilee singers out of Nashville, Tennessee. The first supergroup out of Nashville, Tennessee, the city that's renowned for music, was the Fisk Jubilee singers. The first international import was them, okay? And they're still singing today, right? Talking about 9 college students your age, right out of slavery, who were singing the songs that their grandfathers and their grandmothers had passed down to them from the fields, from slavery. These were the songs that helped them get through the whips and the chains and the hunger and the deprivation, right? They preserved those songs and spread them all around the world. And now today, you can't even imagine being any place in the world not hearing Black American music. And that's a fact, okay? They were doing that pioneer work, when people had heard about the Civil War, but had never heard Black people singing, which is almost unimaginable today, right? Or let's say Blind Boone, who was a little kid, 6 months old, got encephalitis. Oh, your brain is gonna swell until you die. The only remedy is to remove literally your eyes out of your head. That's what he had to endure. And then became a very famous ragtime piano player. Scott Joplin, who started ragtime. If you're any jazz fans in the house, yeah, no ragtime, no jazz. Because jazz became jazz by swinging ragtime. That's what happened. Okay, Henry Box Brown. Here's a guy who was a slave in Virginia until around the time that his master sold his wife and I think, was it 2 or 3 kids down south, which means if you get sold down south, that means your lifespan is immediately limited to about 8 to 10 years, max. And he decided, okay, peace, I'm out. How'd he do it? Put himself in a little box, 2.5 by 3.5 by 2.5 feet. Had himself mailed from Virginia to Philadelphia. Came out of the box singing, and that was beginning of his performance career. Then they tried to drag him back into slavery when in 1851 the Fugitive Slave Act was passed. He said, nope, I'm out. Went to Britain and started a whole performance, right? And he was performing his ancestors. Because what he did was a performance about the triangular slave trade, culminating in his own escape, right? And then became a mesmerist after the Civil War. Crazy story, but true, right? So, all of these stories, and there are many more, that I couldn't get into the book, right, are fascinating to me because they're part of my story. When I look back, what would people be saying 200 years from now or 300 years from now? When you write about history, to a certain degree, you become entwined in that history. So I would say to any writers here today, it behooves you, right, to know your history. Know your history. Long answer to your short question. Maybe one more. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. My first initial question was going to be how, and I was just going to leave it right there, but I realized that probably is not good. So I'm really glad that other people asked questions about the beginning and middle of your process. So now I want to ask one about the end. How do you know when to stop? When did Millie and Christine tell you that you were done?
Yeah, well, how do you know when to stop? I guess I had certain aims for these particular poems, and there was a structure that defined them. That's not always true when you're writing. Form does that. Form tells you it's a sonnet. You only got 14 lines. It's going to start here and it's going to end there, right? But that's not always the way it works out. I think that I know that I'm done when I know that I just can't make it. I can't sharpen it anymore to my capacity. This is the best I can do. Anytime you publish a piece of writing, what you're really saying is, this is the best I could do at this time in my life, right? I mean, I left nothing on the field, so to speak. I put 1,000% into this poem, into this story, into this book, whatever it is, and this is where I am, right? But that means many drafts, right? And that's what it is. It's what does it say? 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. So there you go. Okay. Thank you.